make me self-conscious. We hadn't got started this morning. Anyway, if you'll tear out this little sheet on the side, it's a connection card. We'd love to know that you were here today. Fill it out and just drop it in the basket. It's going to be passed in just a few minutes. Also, there's a place on the back for prayer requests. If you mark those prayer requests confidential, only myself and the pastor will take care of those. If you don't, then our prayer ministry team will pray for those at least twice a week, and we'd love to hear from you on that. Also, members, our offering envelopes are in there. You know what to do with those. 8 weeks ago, we started a series, or a little mini-series called 4, and we have been trying to earn the right to be heard by doing good things, expecting nothing in returns, but that one day those people that we're doing those good things for would say, why do you do it? What's the reason? And so that we could tell them that God is for them, and we are for them, and so is Highland Park. And look how far we have gotten. We are moving our way around our piece of artwork. I'm not sure you can call it that because I'm doing it. But anyway, we're moving our way around, and hopefully and prayerfully the things that we are doing is making a difference in people's lives. And one day it'll make a difference in the kingdom because people will be added to the kingdom. We also have been in this series called What Makes You Happy. And today we're going to do something that seems kind of different. We're going to talk about something that seems a little bit contrary to thought. And that is when you get yourself the way that you want yourself, you're still not going to be happy. When you make yourself into what you want yourself to be, you're still not going to be happy. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. Basket passers, if you'll come on up, we're going to pray over our offering and they'll pass the baskets. And then Johnny and the band will take us back into a time of worship. God, thank you so much for the beautiful weather outside, for the people that are inside. And Lord, we pray that everything we do and say and give here today would bring glory and honor to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let's go ahead and stand as we continue in worship this morning.
At the foot of the cross, where grace and suffering meet, you have given me life.
You sing this last song with us? I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see His wounds, His hands, His feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid Him down in Joseph's tomb. The entrance sealed by heavy stone. The soil still and all alone. Bring it up. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For in this days we will sing Your praise, O Lord, O Lord our God. Sing it on the third. And on the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, tremble death, where its course lead. The angels roar for Christ the King. We sing, oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore.
Let's have a time of prayer real quick. God, you are bigger than the craziness of my mind this morning. And I just pray that you would just be you, and that you would come through this morning, you would speak to us, and that you would accomplish what you have in store for us today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. I had a crazy week, and that's kind of why my mind is so crazy. I have been busy and all over. And, had Tori this weekend, and that's crazy enough. But anyway, here we are in week 6 of this series, What Makes You Happy? And the one thing that we have learned for sure is that everyone thinks they know what will make them happy, but they're still not happy. So that just lets us know that we can't trust what we think, right? So one last time, what makes you happy? Nothing. Oh. Happiness always involves a who or two. Things are not going to make us happy. We have to have healthy relationships. We have to have a healthy relationship with ourselves. We have to have a healthy relationship with others. And we have to have a healthy relationship with our Creator. And then from the second week of the series, what makes you happy? Sowing. Right, sowing. Very good. Okay. That's right. You sow your way to happiness. Happiness is an outcome that is not immediately accessible. You have to sow your way to happiness. Jesus essentially told us that when it comes to happiness, we got to sow for it. There are behaviors and habits that will contribute to or take away from our future happiness, and we have to sow for it. If we fail to prioritize, then we are planning for our unhappiness. Wayne, about 3 weeks ago, bought me some paint, right? To paint the new college and careers classroom. And I have all kinds of intentions to paint that room. But the paint is still in the can. So what I'm getting at is this. You can know all this stuff that we've been talking about. But if you don't start to do it, if you don't start to use it, it's about as good as paint in the can. Right? We have to start to live these things out that we have been talking about, because it's when we do them that it's going to make the difference in our lives. And as I told you when I came up for the welcome time, what we're going to be talking about today is very counterintuitive. In fact, if you haven't experienced what I'm going to share with you today for yourself, you're going to think that I'm pursuing an agenda, or that I have something coming later that's going to reach out and grab you, because it just doesn't seem to make sense. You're not going to think I'm teaching truth from Scripture. You're going to think I've got something in store for you. You might even think that I ran out of good stuff to say, and so I'm just doing what preachers sometimes have to do and throwing this in on the end. But that's not the case. So let's quit with the introduction and let's get started today. The big idea for today is this. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy. As long as you are all about you, as long as it's only about you, no matter what you have and no matter what you accomplish, as long as you are about you, you can't. It's not just that you won't, you can't be happy. You can't fulfill you. You need more than you have to offer. In fact, if you somehow get yourself exactly the way you want yourself, if you somehow get yourself exactly the way you want yourself, the right size, the right income, the right car or truck, the right everything, if you somehow get yourself exactly the way you want yourself, you still won't be enough. You still won't be happy. And again, I know this is counterintuitive, because naturally, the natural part of us thinks if I could just get certain things, If I could just have certain things in my life, if I could live a certain way, if I could be a certain level of healthiness, if I could have a certain look about myself, if I could have a certain whatever. And that whatever is different for everybody, but we all have this natural part of us that just thinks that possibly I could be happy if I just got those certain things. But the truth is, and we kind of know this, but maybe today is just a big reminder more than anything else, but you can't acquire, consume, or exercise your way to happiness. You can't acquire, consume, or exercise your way to happiness. And I figured out the last part of that, but I'm still struggling with the first part. I want you to think about this for just a minute because this is such a huge lie. And here's what we do. When it comes to acquiring, consuming, exercising, whatever, what we do is that we look at certain people around us. And we look at the stuff that they consume. And I don't mean food, I mean things, the stuff that they bring into their lives and they use for their pleasure or whatever. And we look at the way people look. We look at how someone else looks, whether it's their weight or their size or their height or, how they do their hair or whatever. And we tell ourselves, if I could just be that, if I could live that way, if I could just have those things, then I'll be happy because it'll be what I wanted. It'll be exactly what I wanted. And we look at others, sometimes even from a great distance, and we say, they must be happy because they have this, so that's what I want. If I have that, then I'll be happy too. And what we do is we look at a bunch of different people. There's not just one person that we look at. I doubt there's anybody in here that would sit back and they would look at one individual and they would say, I would trade everything for what that individual has. I would trade my job, I would trade my kids, I would trade my spouse, I would trade my siblings. Okay, some of y'all would say that, but there's probably not one person in here that you could look, not one person somewhere that you would look at and say, I would trade everything. But you take this bunch of people, these 6 people or these 8 people or these 10 people, and what we do is we create this composite person, this montage of personhood, and we hope to be like that composite person. Not those people individually, but that composite person that we're creating in our own minds. And we think, if I only had that marriage, if I only had a body like that, if I only had a house like that, if I had a truck like that, if I only had an education like he had, if I only had kids like they have, if my kids could only have the education that her kids have, and we look at this 8, 10 dozen different people, and we begin to compare ourselves to this imaginary composite person that doesn't exist, and suddenly we're unhappy. And we're left wanting. And we're wanting for something that doesn't exist. Because we're not looking at a person. We're looking at multiple people in this mental composite person that we've drawn. And we get hyper-focused on becoming something that's never existed. And that in truth, if we took those individual people, probably we would find out if we knew them better that they struggle with being unhappy too, despite the fact that they look like that, and that they have that, and that they drive that. And this composite person that doesn't exist, you know what a composite person is? It's a Frankenstein, right? Frankenstein was a composite person, a monster. Don't believe in monsters. Don't believe in monsters. Don't believe in your composite person because he or she doesn't and cannot exist. You can't acquire, consume, or exercise your way to happiness because all of the acquiring, all of the consuming, and all of the exercise is in comparison to people who probably aren't really happy either. I remember in college, and this is so far from today, y'all might need to close your eyes. But I remember in college, I used to work out with these bodybuilders, okay? And I wasn't exactly like them, but I was a pretty fit fiddle. I said you'd have to close your eyes, okay? But anyway, and they would have these bodybuilding magazines in the gym at Gold's. And they would be looking at them, and they would call one of their buddies over. They'd be like, look at his arms. I want arms like his arms. And 10 minutes later, they'd flip the page, and they'd say, hey, check out this dude's calves. Look at this workout to get calves like his calves. And in their minds, they would be building this composite person of people who probably aren't happy either. You can't acquire, consume, or exercise your way to happiness. You ready? But you can serve and volunteer your way there. You can serve and volunteer your way there. And before you turn me off, before you try to get up and leave, there are no green sheets in the back of the room. Okay? I have no ulterior motive this morning but to help you become happy. Okay? To help you be the person that Jesus wants you to be and that God created you to be. And this truth is so amazing. And some of you know it because you've experienced in your lives, but others of you, you've never experienced this because we're so busy trying to become our composite person by consuming, acquiring, and exercising that we've never gotten the opportunity to figure this out in our lives. If you don't believe me today, what I'm fixing to tell you, I want you to go look this up. Excuse me. You're getting so good that you sense it coming, don't you? If you don't believe what I'm telling you today, I want you to go home and get on your computers and look this stuff up. This is true stuff. There is research after research conducted all over the world between the connection between happiness, serving, volunteering, and even personal health. And there are studies all over the world about the relationships between those ideas. Project after project all over this world have found an overt connection between happiness, and you ready for it? Selflessness. All over the world by people who aren't believers, just dudes in the medical field and in the psychological field, have found a direct, overt connection between being happy and being selfless. Several years ago, a research study was done by the University of Chicago. And the basic idea behind the study is what are the most satisfying jobs and who is the most happy at work. And the most satisfying jobs can be kind of lumped into 4 categories. You ready? Caring for others, teaching others, protecting others, and creative pursuits. And some of you are like, why'd you put the creative pursuits in there? That's not about others. Well, it's the truth, right? So I'm putting the truth in there. That's what they found. 4 things that led to the most satisfying jobs, the 4 themes that led to the people who were the happiest at their work were caring for others, teaching others, protecting others, and creative pursuits. And listen to this. There was absolutely no income associated with the happiness in their workplace as long as the person made enough to pay their bills, eat, and live under a roof. Didn't even have to be their own. They just had to make enough to pay their bills, eat, and live under a roof, and they were happy. Caring for others, teaching others. It's all about others In fact, the top 5 positions for job satisfaction, and this isn't on the screen, were clergy, physical therapist, others, right? Firefighters, others, laying it on the line, right? Educators, okay, serving kids, right? And artists. It's all about being selfless, and those people who were selfless in their jobs were the happiness, and there was zero link to having a higher salary and being happy. None. None. In fact, most of those people on that list, think about it, what fireman that you know doesn't have another job or work on the side? What teacher you know that doesn't do something in the summers to make more income, right? There's no link. It's not about the income, it's about being selfless. In the United Kingdom, they looked at 40 studies spanning a 20-year period of time to look at the link between selflessness, serving, and volunteering, and health and happiness. And here's what they found out. That volunteering, if you volunteer, and this isn't talking about like your boss makes you go to the Heart Walk and so you go once a year and that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about people who systematically, who have a plan, a regular plan for serving others. It lowers depression. It lowers heart disease. It lowers stress. It lowers drug use and unplanned pregnancy in teenagers. Listen to this. This is crazy. This blew my mind. Parents, even if you have to force your kids to serve and volunteer, there is a direct connection between forcing them to volunteer and the decrease in drug use and unplanned pregnancies. They don't have to like it or be happy about it. And let's be honest, if you were driving to Disney World, they'd be unhappy the whole way, right? So it doesn't matter if you force them to do it. If you force them to serve, there's still a direct correlation between less drug use and less unplanned pregnancy. Sorry, guys. Okay? And they also found out from that same study that there was a greater inclination in the lives of teenagers who were forced to serve to become willing servants as adults. A direct correlation. In other words, even though they're mad at you for making them serve on Saturday, 10 years from now, they're going to be a better servant because you made them serve. Also, that same study found out that volunteering increases psychological well-being. It increases physical health. It increases self-esteem. It increases longevity, and it increases a person's perception of their quality of life. Clinical research also shows that volunteering and mentoring on a regular basis pumps up a person's immune system, makes you more capable to fight disease if you are serving and mentoring others. Why is that? How can that be? Because our natural inclination, what we are naturally geared to do, because of the way this world is to acquire, consume, and to try to exercise our way to happiness, not give our time away. That's not what we're wired to do, so why is that? How can behaving selflessly make myself happier? Think about that. How is it that behaving selflessly can make you happier? Or another way to say it, how can emptying myself leave me feeling full? How can pouring ourselves out feel like we're filling ourselves up? What's the answer? The answer to all of those questions is divine design. In other words, you were created by God to serve. You were created by God to be selfless. You were created by God to do all of those New Testament one another's. You were created to live with open hands, willing to give and be selfless. And you will thrive. And you will be happier and healthy when you are doing all those New Testament one another's. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Love one another, care for one another, serve one another, forgive one another. We were designed by God for one another. We were designed by God for one another to be selfless. Selfishness is natural. Don't believe so? Bring Addie Kate in here, right? It won't be too long until she's grabbing something out of the toy box in the nursery that she didn't pay for and Mama didn't put in there, and she's saying what? Mommy, you ain't got to be taught that. It's natural, right? Selfishness is natural, but it is not part of our divine design. It is the result of the brokenness of this world. You and me, we have got to find a way to give ourselves away. Happy people find a way to give their lives away. Sin, we talked about this before, sin separates us. Sin pulls us into our own self-centered world, and it whispers, you'll be happier. You'll be happier if you take care of you. You'll be happier if you fill yourself up. You'll be happier if you acquire stuff for yourself. That's how you'll be happier. But thankfully, Paul, in his letter to the Galatian church, he kind of gives us a much better picture than that whisper that we hear in our head. And he gives us two lists that stand in stark contrast to this selfish mentality that is so natural to us, to help us understand this from biblical truth. So here we go. Some of y'all were like, when's he getting to the Bible? Okay, here we go. I need to please. Here we go. Galatians 5:19. The acts of the flesh. We're going to stop right there because the idea of the flesh can be confusing, but in other translations it says the acts of the sinful nature. In other words, if you could do whatever your natural impulses wanted to do, void of all of God's purpose for your life, if you could just pursue what you would pursue naturally, that's the flesh. So here we go. The acts of the flesh are obvious. In other words, what Paul is saying is, this is really elementary here. And you already know these answers. And then he chuckles. He says, I'm going to tell you anyway. Here we go. The acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery. That just means excessive sexual behavior. Idolatry. That means trying to get God to do what you want God to do, or thinking that you've got God in your pocket and you can pull out the God card anytime you want to. That's idolatry. And witchcraft. That basically means thinking you're going to harness the forces of nature for your better self or whatever. Okay. Hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I'm thinking, no, right? That would not be me. Would it? Without God? You bet your bottom dollar it'd be me. Void of God, the flesh wants those things. If you just went with your natural inclinations, that's what it would look like. And to kind of summarize that list of things that we think are so horrible, basically the summary of that list is this: it's our pleasure at other people's expense. Selfishness is pleasure at other people's expense, even when you don't get caught, even when you think nobody's watching. Because all of those things in that list, all of those things are associated with appetites. And appetites are never satisfied. When you feed an appetite, your appetite grows. Whether it is sex or recognition or wanting stuff, whatever it is that you go out and feed yourself with to find pleasure in, you are going to want more. And eventually, the well dries up. And you are just left frustrated. Just like anybody at the dinner table who says, "Can I have some more chicken?" And mama says, "No, it's all gone." And you're like, "What? I know there was 8 pieces when that chicken got cut up. And there are not but 3 of us. Where's my other piece?" Right? We get frustrated when we can't feed our appetites. And frustration equals unhappiness. There are always limits to the deeds of the flesh. Because these appetites are always going to come back wanting more. But thankfully, Paul doesn't stop there. He doesn't stop with that list. Instead, he gives us another list, and it starts in verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit. Now that word "but" lets us know that this is in contrast to the other list. So we've got the acts of the sinful nature over here, and we've got the fruits of the Spirit over here. They are in contrast to one another. And if you finally come to the point where you agree with God and you say, "Okay, it's not about me, it's going to be about others. I'm going to be an others-focused person." He says the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, forbearance or patience. Y'all remember what that is? That's moving at other person's speed, right? Okay. Patience, kindness, goodness. That means doing the right thing no matter what it costs you. That's goodness. Faithfulness. Faithfulness is like, you can trust me. I will be there always. That's faithfulness. Faithfulness, gentleness. Y'all remember that one? That's leveraging your strength for someone else's benefit. And self-control. That's a pretty stark contrast, right? That's 2 big contrasts. You know, I really need to be over here with one list and over there with another list, because that's a big contrast. But Paul doesn't stop there. He makes one of the most brilliant statements in all of ancient literature, in all of the New Testament. Here's what he says. Against such things there is no law. Against such things there is no law. And some of you are like, what does that mean? Put that list up there. Yeah. Loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, gentle, self-control. Against those things there is no law. I want you to imagine your family being characterized by those things. Imagine your family being characterized by those things. Are you going to be happy? Absolutely you're going to be happy. Imagine our church. We hand out surveys to everybody that comes in. We say, write down 3 or 4 words that describe that church. Imagine if people looked at us and saw us as loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, gentle, and self-controlled. Would we be happy? Absolutely we'd be happy. Imagine a community where those things describe the community. What in the world would the police do? They would have to stand at stop signs and wave people on, because the people at the stop signs would be wanting the other person to get to go first. The policeman would be just directing traffic. Because against those things, there is no law. When we're being selfless, community could somehow be selfless, there would be almost no need for any law. Because if each of us is always out for the best interests of other people, what is it that we can't figure out on our own? What problem is it that we couldn't solve? How awesome would it be to go to sleep at night and not worry about what you left in the car? Or not worry about checking to see if the doors were locked or the garage was left up? We might sleep better. We wouldn't worry so much. Our stress and anxiety would decrease, and we would be happier. Selflessness is by God's design. Selfishness is natural, but it is not by design. Life works better when our lives are characterized by these things. You will never be frustrated. You will never go hungry when you are pouring yourselves out. You will be satisfied because there are never limits to the satisfaction that comes from giving yourself away. There is almost no limit to how much of yourself you can give away, and there is no limit to the satisfaction that will return from it. Some of y'all are like me, and you're like, I'm not sure I'll buy it. I'd still like the truck. I'd still like to be skinnier. I'd still like to be healthier. I'd still like my hair. Oh, that ain't me. Thank goodness. Don't leave one. You need more proof? Let me ask you this question. How do we measure the value of a life? How do we measure the value of a life? Imagine that you go to a funeral, and you're sitting at the funeral, and somebody gets up to talk about the deceased. Let me just tell you what you're not going to hear. You are not going to hear they were immoral, impure, indulgent, hateful, jealous, angry, selfish, argumentative, envious, and drunk. You're not going to hear that. Because we don't measure life that way. You're not going to go to somebody's funeral and the preacher get up and say, that dude was amazing. He slept with almost any woman he could get his hands on. He spent every dollar he could get his hands on. He argued and fought like the best of all sailors and drunk them all under the table. You're not going to hear that. Because those things have no value. They are all consumptive. They are all about pleasure at another person's expense. And they add nothing to our society. They add nothing to our lives. The people who struggle with these things aren't happy. And we know that. But yet every single day we are tempted to wake up and try to acquire, consume, or exercise our way to happiness. And it won't work because we're not designed that way. The value of a life, the value of a life is always measured by how much is given away. That's what we celebrate. We celebrate how much a person found that he could give away. That's what's remembered. And we look at those people and we realize that how much one pours out, it brings satisfaction, not emptiness. I told you a few weeks ago, Christy and I have some people that we pattern our lives after, that we try to be like. I'm not talking about mirroring their appearance. I'm not talking about mirroring their health. I'm talking about giving it away and serving. We have some role models when it comes to that. We have some of the most giving people you can possibly imagine that we have witnessed in our lives, and that's what we try to model. That's the role model that we are trying to imitate. You have to find a systematic way to give yourself away. Because if you don't find a way, a plan to serve and to volunteer and to be selfless with who you are and what you are, then you're going to end up like this right here. Now that looks pretty, don't it? Does that look pretty? What is that? That's the Dead Sea. If we don't learn to give ourselves away, we're going to become like the Dead Sea. And most of you know this about the Dead Sea, so I'm going to be quick. But all the water that funnels into the Sea of Galilee flows down the Jordan River and ends up in the Dead Sea. But when it gets to the Dead Sea, that water has no place to go. It just sits there. It is the lowest spot on the earth. And because of that, there is nothing living in it. And y'all pretty much know that, right? No water gets out, so nothing lives in it. Bottom line, right? But here's what we don't know. Put this next picture up here. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not. But that's the water. And all that brown to the left, that's where the water used to be over the last 100 years. The Dead Sea is at its lowest depth that it has been in over 100 years. How is that possible? How is it possible that the Dead Sea is drying up? Right now, as you and I speak, there are people running diesel pumps and pumping thousands and thousands of gallons of water into the Dead Sea every hour, and it is still drying up. It is at its lowest recorded level ever. But the Sea of Galilee is thriving. It is like a resort. You Google the Sea of Galilee, and all you'll see is positive, life-giving pictures. People on jet skis or skiing or sailing or fishing. And that water leaves the Sea of Galilee at an enormous rate, I might add. That water leaves the Sea of Galilee at an enormous rate. And it travels just 87 miles through the Jordan River, down into the Dead Sea, and it goes nowhere, and yet that thing is drying up. How? Water is pouring in. None is going out. How's it shrinking? Listen to me. If you don't find a systematic way to give yourself away, you will become like the Dead Sea. You will dry up and die despite everything that every person has been pouring into your life for years. If you don't find a way to give it away, you will become smaller and smaller of a person and more frustrated and more unhappy until you dry up and die. You and me, we were made for more than ourselves. You were made for more than you. It's not intuitive, it makes no sense, but it's true. If it's all about you, you'll never be happy. You can't fulfill you. You need more than you have to offer yourself. When you get exactly the way that you want to be, it won't be enough. We cannot acquire, consume, or exercise our way to happiness. And the reason why is that you were designed by the giver of your life to give your life away. And when we do that, when we learn to systematically give this life away, that's when we begin to find life. That's when we begin to find happiness, is when we learn to let that stuff pour back out. Otherwise, it just sits there and it becomes stagnant. I've got a hole in my backyard. And I've got a guy that's like erosion specialist, and he's supposed to be coming over to take a look at it for me. But over the last 2 years, it's gotten about 4 feet deep. And every time it rains, it fills with water, and that water just sits there for weeks at a time until the next rain comes along. In fact, all summer long, and y'all know how dry it got, all summer long, I think it was dry one time. Because every bit of water from the neighborhood somehow funnels its way into my hole. If 4 doors down waters their yard, it fills up my hole. And it just sits there. You know what it gets? Mosquitoes. I got a neighbor who's so germophobic, it's a blessing. She pours mosquito poison in it for me because she don't want her kids getting eaten up by mosquitoes. I'm grateful. Why is that water sitting there? Because it has no place to go. And that water becomes stagnant, it becomes stinky, and it becomes mosquito infested. When we learn to give ourselves away, that is how we are going to find life. Happy is the person who gives away a piece of their life every day. My challenge for you today, as obviously we're coming to a close, is this. Are you pouring out? Are you serving selflessly? There are lots of people who serve to get something in return. That's not this. That type of service doesn't work. Because when you don't get what you expected, you're out the door and you're gone. When that person doesn't say kind words like you expected from volunteering with that group, you're gone. When that group of people doesn't treat you the way you thought when you got sick, you're gone. When that organization doesn't give you the jacket they gave you last year, you're gone. And you're laughing. Some of you are smiling, but that's the truth. That's not the kind of service we're talking about. We're talking about being selfless and serving others and expecting nothing in return. And when we do, we'll find life. And I told you, I didn't have an ulterior motive today. I don't have green sheets in the back. I'm not going to tell you that there are places here that need people like you to serve. I'm not going to do that today. But you need to find a way to selflessly serve and give your life away. You may be here, we're at the end of this series, and you may have a decision that you need to make. It may not have anything to do with what we said today. I'm going to be down at the front. I'd love to talk to you. But my challenge to you is to figure out how you're pouring it out. And if you're pouring it out, is it selfless? Or is it looking for something in return? And if it's looking for something in return, I'm not saying don't give it. I'm not saying give it up. Those people need you wherever they are. But I'm saying change your motive. Make sure your motive is about the glory of God. Just like when we do those good things, the motive is supposed to be the glory of God. Let me pray for you. God, my prayer today, this week is simple. May we just take some moments today and self-evaluate and see if we're giving our life away or if we're living with closed hands. Lord, my prayer is that today when we leave, that our hands would be a little less clenched, they'd be a little wider open, and that because of that, you would be glorified and honored, and as a result, we would be happier. In Jesus' name, amen.
Cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me.
Barney or Sue Cruz or Mama Fanning. You don't have to have any experience, but just like I said last week, it helps if you know your ABCs. The youth group is going to lunch after Life Group on September the 30th, and then they're going to kick us off to ride the horses. Cost is $25 and covers lunch and riding. Registration is due by next Sunday, September the 23rd. Women's Bible study, going on today. Women's Bible study, Seamless, meets at 4:30 today here in the Worship Center. September's Operation Christmas Child item is a toy for girls. Please put your donations in the box in the lobby right over in this corner. And I, like Philip, used to work out. Really. I was at the gym and I handed all those big guys their towels. Brought it up real well. We want to thank Philip for filling in and doing what he's done and just an excellent job. We want to continue also to pray for the people under the influence of this Hurricane Florence. I know personally that we have 2 Marines. I don't know where Philip is. Is he anywhere on the coast now? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, they're getting a lot of rain. But I know that Jake, Halford, and Curtis Bailey are there.
know life group leaders are already, oh no, here we go. I just want to publicly thank the church for allowing my family this time. I want to thank the deacons, and I especially want to thank Philip. You guys, we do not understand how blessed we are to have him and his family. They have ministered to me, and so many of you have written cards to my family, and the life group that we're in brought a meal, and that felt so weird to be receiving a meal. I'm like, I'm not sick, but it's so appreciated, and just the people who have checked on us. This question has been asked a lot, so I'll go ahead and tell you. The question is, how are you? The answer is better. The truth is, just like everybody else, we struggle with life, and we do things, and we work through things. And I have areas of my life that need more surrendering to God, and this is no secret. Most of you that know me, and we're working on those things. But we've gone through a very difficult season in our life, but I feel like God has used it to cause a breakthrough. I feel like our family will be stronger because of this time. Thank you guys for allowing us to have this time to focus on ourselves and on me and my family. And again, thank you so much, not just for your understanding, but your support. Philip, he has done such an amazing job. I've been gone, but I've listened every week to the messages, and it's just blessed me. I knew these outlines before Philip preached them, but he's brought them to life in a way that is really, at the moment God needed to tell me things, he's used Philip to do that. And I am so thankful for all that God is going to continue to do through Philip and his ministry here with us. We are very, very blessed. The best is yet to come. Let's pray before I talk some more. When we dismiss the life group. Listen, if you don't have a life group, that is so important. You can't live selflessly without surrounding yourself with people. And life group is a great way to do that. So stop by the connection desk. They'll tell you all about that, and they'll let you know. Mickey's life group has a fellowship today. Are y'all leaving after service? So they're not going to have their life group in the fellowship hall. They're going to go straight on to the fellowship. So if you're part of that life group, you're welcome to attend. If you're not part of a life group, check with Mickey and go, hey, what's the best way to start being part of a life group? Just go eat, right? Go eat, hang out, and know folks. So anyone's invited. If you're part of a life group, go to your life group leader once you come to your life group. So we'll go that way. Dear God, thank you so much. Thank you for the fruit of the Spirit, God. I pray that I and everyone else who heard this message this morning would be willing to set aside those areas in our life that we've been selfish and learn to be selfless so that we can learn, Lord, to find your peace and your joy in those areas. God, I pray now that as we move forward, that you would continue to show us your will, continue to show us your blessings, continue to show us, Lord, your direction, and give us the common sense to follow you so that we can be happy, not because of what we have, but because who we're becoming in you. For in Jesus' name we